On the show today, Sara Ness. So Sarah is one of those people I wanted to get to know because she's at the conference, and I thought, who is she? And I heard a couple of good things, and I thought I want to find out about this person, this human. And she looked interesting, into authentic relating, circling, leadership stuff. And I looked at her website and was like, yeah, let's just get her on the podcast to share that with everyone. So Sarah, joining us from Austin, right?
Absolutely.
Welcome.
Thank you.
How do you meet people at parties? You know, what do they say, what do you do? What's your quick response?
Oh God. I pause and look at the ceiling and feel stressed for a minute first.
I like it. Yeah.
And then I say, like, I found community, teach communication, and basically try to like build systems to make more connection in the world.
And in Austin, people might understand that. But if you're in a normal town.
You mean like, give me an example of a normal town. Are we talking like Brighton or a business?
Columbus, Ohio.
Columbus, Ohio. Okay. I would be like, I'm a communication and connection skills teacher. So when you're like fighting with your husband, I give you better, more interesting ways to fight.
That's great. Now I get it. Okay. It's more interesting ways to fight. I like it. My wife's Ukrainian. You don't fight Ukrainians if you want to live. She'll let you win and then cut your throat while you sleep. It's not gonna. So okay. So how did you get into that, Sarah? Like why don't you have a normal life?
I'm bad at normal lives because I have authority issues. So that's one thing.
Well, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm Irish. That's my excuse. What's yours?
I had no idea that was you. Okay. Yeah, I got really, really interested in intentional living communities because I grew up like classic family, suburbs, upper middle class, whatever the fuck. And then I got to college and I got involved in housing cooperatives. And it was like 17 kids in a house together and asked them to run themselves.
Oh, God, American college communists. Disgusting.
Right? Exactly. But it was like the best possible experiment because I got to see all the ways people could like mess up communication with each other and all the ways they could kind of do it well. And I just got totally obsessed. Like I was already into sociology and psychology.
Yeah.
And here's a real example of how that's playing out.
And under pressure, like living away from home for the first time or near first time. And most of those communities don't work, do they? Like most intentional communities just are horrible places full of argument, stress, and like what goes wrong?
It depends. That was one of the really interesting things I found was like there were ones that worked great and ones that worked horribly. And the college co-ops were a great example because it's like for things like co-housing and communes, people build it together and you either build it or it falls apart. Like for co-housing, you have to raise the money. It's kind of like a baby. You have to found it together. And something like 90 or 95% of co-housing projects fail. Wow. But in the co-ops, it was basically student housing. So people would come in and you would vet them, but like they had a choice about whether to stay or to leave. So the culture of the house really determined whether or not they would stay. And the culture of the house depended on like, what were the personalities of people and a lot of like little mini communication tools and systems. Like, did people know what was expected of them? What happened when somebody like didn't do the dishes for a week? Like how was that conflict managed? Or was it just like passive aggressive? I guess nobody's going to talk about it, but they're going to like drop things loudly when they walk past that person's room. You know, you got to see everything.
Yeah. Okay, so the culture. So in terms of like what works there, it's a bit of a microcosm. I remember a university moving in with 14 guys. And at first people bought toilet roll and then no one bought toilet roll. Then you had to bring your own toilet roll to the toilet. And it was just like, you know, no one did the washing up. And then you're like, why should I do it? And there was a certain amount of goodwill and then that goodwill was gone. And then it's like, what happened when there was an argument? Was there conflict? Was there, as you say, passive aggressive? Okay, so you got kind of interested in communication, cooperation, like how this worked.
Yeah, I was like, I can't see any more interesting thing to try to figure out and be endlessly fascinated by like how people interact with each other, both one-on-one and within systems. Because it's so complex. I feel like I understand maybe 0.00001 of it after studying it for 10 years.
Sarah, people are impossible. Just fucking give up. People are impossible. It's too complicated. And okay, what have you learned then? Because obviously people are giving you money to tell them stuff about this. So like give us some basics. Like if somebody, let's say, you know, someone's listening to this, they're just moving into a student house for the first time, or they, God forbid, they've just moved in with their boyfriend for the first time. Like what would be like your top tips here to begin?
Oh gosh, so many. Um, One thing, the culture that something is founded with pretty much ends up being the culture that continues for a long time. There's a really wonderful book. I think it's called the 7 or the 12 Nations of the United States, but it talks
Uh,
about how the US was founded and the different groups that founded it and how the original group's culture is still the culture in those
like the
areas today.
Calvinists or the
Totally. Yeah. The
uh,
the New Netherlands, the people that came in really formed the culture. And that's true of just about anywhere you go. And if you're the leader of something, like if you're starting a relationship, if you're starting a group, if you're moving into a house, how you show up, it automatically influences the
the
entire culture to come.
I've seen this with the conference. We're taking on 300 volunteers now. We've gone from like 5 members of staff to 20 to 50, and now plus 300 volunteers. And I make sure I get all of them new people in a meeting early so they can hear the dick jokes. So
Yeah.
like, because we need to like establish the culture here as we tell rude jokes and we have a sense of humor.
Uh-huh.
And we work hard and we take our commitments very seriously, but we don't take ourselves seriously. And that you can tell people that or write it on a wall, like companies do. These are our values, but actually it's about, are you modeling it? Are people learning that as a leader? And the other influencers in the organization, are they learning it through being in it, right?
And that's one of the things, there's all these tropes about leaders should look at their shadows and leaders should do personal development. The reason to do that isn't to like become a better person. It's because people follow everything they see you doing. They pick
uh,
up on all of your implicit ways of being. And so like communication, is about the reason I love authentic relating is because it's this mix of like authenticity and relating. Yeah, I have a truth over here. Cool. It's only as valuable as it can actually be in interaction with the other person. And so
yeah,
there's this kind of combined what's going to happen, but how I show up, influences everything. So example, like the Austin authentic relating community.
I got thrown out of
I,
No,
what?
I had a good time there. I got into a lot of trouble. There was
Sweet.
there was there was there was someone really annoying, and I just told him, I'm just like, stop it. And yeah, yeah,
And
Jordan,
that's
good friend of mine there. I like Jordan a lot. I had a good time with Jordan afterwards. But I always find I don't like people who do circling, but I do like the people who teach it. My friend
I,
John,
yeah.
Jordan, Marisha, I would marry. These are like really cool people, but like people who are into it are dicks. Like, why is that?
Uh, it depends why people are coming. Like most people are coming because they're like, wow, either wow, I don't have communication skills, I should probably
Yeah.
learn some, or nobody lets me speak my mind. I should probably go to a place where I can just be authentic at people. Like,
Uh,
exactly. So it's like people that stay in community over time, especially authentic relating and circling, they really do like get so much feedback that they either decide, I just like being an asshole and I'm going to keep doing that because it's fun. And the
yeah.
community can decide whether or not to keep me around. Authentic relating and circling, conscious community in general, real hard time with boundaries. That's a thing.
Uh-huh.
That's a thing I've worked
Uh-huh.
on a lot.
Listen,
Um,
we've had Jason Diggs on, and we've had some circling friends on. So I'm kind of bored of talking about that, if I'm honest. But like leadership,
not
I'm really interested in right now because I'm leading this big project. It's a bit bigger than stuff I've led before. I'm learning some leadership lessons the hard way. So if you don't mind, let's talk about leadership a little bit more.
great.
So you consult with leaders, right? I read this on your website. It says there's you with no shoes on, with a big smile, and it says you've consulted over 500 leaders from 40 different cities. You can tell in American because they say cities and not countries. But yeah, 500 leaders. So tell me about that.
On a date, but yes. Yeah, it's like up to 1,000 now, I think. It's like consulting leaders, but a lot like I kind of hate working with people one on one. It's fun, but it's like, okay, now I've poked one person and they're going to spin out and impact things. But I prefer to like do kind of like, how can I form a system that's going to train leaders that then go out and impact other leaders? And then you get this kind of like, at scale effect. So example, just before this, I was working with like 40 different leaders at Google, and we're teaching them how to, set context and how to get feedback and how to speak the elephant in the room. And then, like showing them, like giving them challenges for how to do that on their next meeting. And that's how culture spreads. So a lot of what I do most of the time is set up containers where people can come in, try things, fall flat on their face, get
Yeah.
feedback, confront their demons on it. Like one of my favorite exercises that I do is called block ops. You get people into groups, block ops, like
Yeah.
black ops, but punnier.
Got it. No, I got it. Go on. Tell what happens in block ops.
People get into a group. One person shares the thing they're most scared of happening in leadership, the thing where they're like, I'm gonna lose my shit if this happens. Like, I'm just gonna drop the leadership. I'm gonna get traumatized, frozen, whatever.
Yeah.
So they tell that to their group, and their group is like, cool, we're gonna ask questions until we get it. We're gonna recreate that situation right here and now. And you're gonna try to facilitate. And when you get
It's like
stuck,
a dojo. It's a dojo. It's a place where they can get it wrong and they can practice.
exactly. But when they get stuck, like they can raise their hand, like, okay, and the thing is happening that happens, but then they can actually choose to keep going. They can be like, cool, part of my brain knows that I'm in a safe container. I'm going to keep trying to do this. And then at some point or they can stop. And at some point you pause them and kind of workshop like what happened, what are other ways to do it? And then you play it again. And
doesn't it seem as a facilitator, so much of what we do is controlled torture. You know, it's like consensual torture. We're like, look, there's this thing that's get up, so we're going to make the situation that's consensual and calibrated, and you're going to have choice and you can control it and you can get better at it, and now we're going to torture you. And like, that's most of what we do, right?
yeah, but that's pretty much what life does all the time, except without the consensual bit.
Without consensual or without control. It's not calibrated either. It's just random shit. So just throwing it at you. Like, I tell people about leadership at the moment, I'm just like, you don't want to be a leader. Like, there's this idea of that leadership's a great thing and everyone wants to be a leader and there's all these books on it. It's like, you don't want to be a leader. Like,
well, the question is, how can you not? Like everyone almost always at some point gets pushed into like managing a meeting or dealing with a group of friends or mediating a conflict with their partner. Like, I don't think we get away from it.
Avoid it wherever possible. That's my advice from now on. Just you don't want to lead anything at scale, anything in the world. The public are insane. And the internet is crazy. And right now, everyone's even more mad. Like, this is not a fun time to lead in.
In terms of modeling, I don't know if I totally agree with the congruence you're showing there, since it seems like you a lot of stuff.
Listen, I know already people copy what I do, not what I say. So it doesn't matter what I say. I can say anything. People are going to be like, oh, let's do a thing. But yeah. Okay. So leadership lessons. Top. Like, I'm going to be an annoying interviewer who just asks like, quick win bullet points. Austin Love Juggernaut. What's that? I just saw that on your website.
That was the original Austin Authentic Relating community. When I helped start the Houston one and then the Austin one, and I co-founded the Houston one, and I was like, let's call it the Houston Love Juggernaut. And they were like, no, we're not calling it that. That's stupid. So then I founded the Austin one, and then nobody could tell me no. So it's the Austin Love Juggernaut.
I like your name. I would go to circling if it was called Austin Love Juggernaut. Okay, yeah, I would feel like I'd been overpromised and underdelivered if I got there and it wasn't like a giant sex toy or something.
Not
okay, so this is interesting. I work 70 to 80 hours a week and survive half on donations. Why? That's what it says in your website.
Yeah, a little bit better now, but I still have a Patreon. It's more like, God, I was having a conversation with this about someone the other day about this distinction between like, you can do what you love, you can do what makes money, or you can work a reasonable amount of time. Pick one or two.
Pick two.
So yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like, I work a lot of the time. There's not always a lot of distinction between my personal and my work life, because like if I love someone, I'm probably collaborating with them on something.
Is that wise? Should we collaborate with everyone we love at work? Is that a smart idea?
I mean, that's what you told me at the beginning of the interview. I was like, why you want to interview me? And you were like, well, I wanted to get to know you, and I figured we should probably do a podcast, at some point.
Yeah, made it kind of easier. Yeah.
It's that sort of thing. But so it's like, I love what I do. I can't figure out much else better that I could do with my time, except for constantly going bouldering and like kayaking and stuff. But I can do that in my free time.
Yeah.
And the half on donations thing is like, this is something I'm trying to figure out a lot right now. I don't like the system, like the capitalist system of money, obviously, but like there's something.
Capitalism's amazing. What are you talking about? It's the best system we've ever tried.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean it's good.
But what compared to what? To take Thomas Sowell's question to every
That's kind of what I'm trying to figure out. So like, for instance, all the manuals on my site are by donation, like pay what you can. I'm trying to figure out models for workshops that might be more inclusive, where it's like, because people make a choice, right? On that do what you love versus make money. Some people are like, I need to make money. I need that safety and stability, or I'm supporting other people. So I'm
Yeah.
going to give up some of my like personal passion to do that. And they can pay for workshops, right? And then other people are like, I want to do something that doesn't make as much money. And that's not always like, I want to be an artist and just pursue my passion all the time. Sometimes it's like,
Yeah.
I want to do stuff that's good for the world, like teaching doesn't make a lot of money, but it's what I think I can contribute most. I
Yeah.
don't think those people should be penalized for having made a choice that puts them outside of like the system of, how much they can pay. So there's a question of like what as leaders is most ethical to do around money to make sure that people are getting into the workshops that legitimately want to be there, but people that just want to pay less because they like bargains and discounts
They're taking the
are
piss.
not.
There's this great saying I heard the other day, which is kind of like, the smaller the community, the more I'm a communist, and the bigger it is, the more I'm a capitalist. In the like I trust my wife or my close friends, or even like a small circle, like an aikido club that I'm part of. I trust, I really trust everyone at my aikido club will pay what they can, and nobody's taking the piss, and everybody's respecting, what needs to be paid. And the bigger it gets, the harder that seems, and the more freeloaders there are, and the more people there are who really are just taking the piss. So it
Yeah.
almost seems like a scale thing to me.
Well, it's a relationship thing. When people feel invested in you, when they feel
Mhm.
connected to you, they work really differently than if you're just like a face on a screen that they don't have a relationship to. You
Mhm.
don't feel
Mhm.
emotional impact from swindling a face on the screen. You
Right,
do from
right.
swindling your neighbor who you got to see every day. It's awkward.
Yeah, yeah, and there are some people who will still do it, but yeah,
Right.
it's for most of us with empathy, it's far more awkward. Yeah,
So one of
yeah. I
the
mean,
like
it's
one of the
interesting to
questions
pay what you. Sorry, after you.
one of the questions for me is like, how do you create relationship at scale?
Okay, is it possible?
Um, Yes, I think in a couple ways. One, create small decentralized communities rather than one behemoth. Like we don't do certification of authentic relating. It's like you take the games manual, you go out, you take a training if you want to. You don't have to. You can just start a community, try things out, and getting in relationship with people, they'll give you feedback on whether or not it works. So
Uh-huh.
that's one thing. And the other is like creating barriers to entry. Like people don't just get free rides to the courses. They have to fill out a form and then they have to be in communication a little bit with
Uh-huh.
our teachers. So it's like, they know that they're screwing somebody over if they don't, kind of fulfill on their promises. And we're pretty careful about how much we give based on
Hmm.
what we think somebody will follow through on.
Hmm. Hmm. There's other barriers to entry other than money, aren't there? And as you say, it's like, sometimes I had situations where, like, you have to come and talk to me if you would like a discount.
Right.
But then it's like, yeah, but then maybe it's just a barrier for the shy people. You know what I mean? Because there are some pretty
You
ballsy
have to
people.
get to the mark first.
Yeah, that's the deal. You have to look me in the eye. You have no. How about that? You have to take it out of my wife's clenched fist if you want.
Oh man,
So
that
it's
was
you have to
fun.
smash my child's piggy bank and take the money out if you want a discount. You have to break it. No, I mean, we can make this pretty
So
ridiculous.
what kind of leadership training are we talking about here?
This is the special leadership training. Um, okay, cool. So, do you think it will catch on? Do you think this, like, authentic relating, circling, all this kind of stuff? Because like, it's been around a little while, but it seems to be a very select group of people. Do you think it will become a mainstream thing, like yoga's got mainstream?
Like, for one thing, authentic relating and circling aren't necessarily something new.
Yeah.
Like this stuff's been around for decades and centuries. T group, encounter groups, like
Yeah.
nonviolent communication, est, like authentic relating's not circling's more encounter group than authentic relating is. Authentic relating is like communication tools and specific structures. You can bring that into a company, no
Yeah.
problem. They'll figure out how to use it. I actually don't love the two getting lumped together because they're really different. Um, but they have, all these practices have gotten traction over a long period of time. They've gotten traction in a certain group and certain culture, and they translate to other groups and cultures, but they don't look the same. So we're like, well, there's no circling in companies. Sure, there's something like circling in
Right,
companies.
right. A meeting format. There's some sort of facilitated meeting format, open meeting,
Or
whatever.
even just like a group that gets like Google had this thing, Project Aristotle, that looked at what teams functioned best. And what they found is that the teams that functioned best didn't matter demographics, amount of time people had been there, whatever. It mattered how attuned people were to each other's like subtle signals. So basically how emotionally aware they
Mhm,
were, and
mhm.
was there relatively equal speaking time. If you
Yeah.
get into a team that has that, a lot of the time it looks like circling. So it's like, has it gotten in there? Yeah, sure, under different names. Can it be taught? Yes, but you have to translate it. Like half of authentic relating and
Yeah.
circling, learning the language and speaking it.
Yeah, there's a translation piece, isn't there? That, like, you know, you were talking about like showing up earlier. You know, if some of my friends, you talk about showing up, they wouldn't understand what that meant. They would be
Exactly,
like,
it's jargon.
yeah, it's
And
jargons.
and I will say there are um a lot of the way authentic relating, circling, and conscious practice look now is there like there is a right way to communicate when you are more conscious and have fluid communication, and there is a wrong way to communicate where you don't take other people's perspectives and you're often of the older generation, and like it is like I don't like that, and I've been working on cracking that
Yeah.
code.
Yeah, I
And so I
definitely
think
confused
that gap.
people at Austin. I was like, I divided opinion because it was like half of them were like, oh, okay, cool, this guy's communicating, but in a very different way. And the other half were like, but he's swearing. And
Yeah.
that he seems kind of like a guy. That's not allowed. So it was confusing to some people because I think they got used to a certain form rather than what was maybe underneath that.
And that's something that I've really been trying to stand for in my own work is how do we create forms of communication that actually have people listen to each other where they're at, where it's like it's not me just saying, hey, you're not speaking my language, so I'm not going to listen. It's me saying, how do I listen in your language whether or not I agree, and meet you there first, or understand it, or get like get fascinated by it or get annoyed by it and decide what kind of boundary I want to set. That's fine too, but not force you to speak my language.
Let me ask you the question I asked Jason. I had a
Mhm.
fun interview with Jason. I was a bit of a bitch to him, to be fair, but it
You
was
said
fun
that.
for me. And I had a good time. I'm not sure he did. But I'll ask a question, ask him, genuine question, no joking. I find a lot of people boring, okay? And I find myself in a situation where I'm kind of bored of them talking. And
Mhm.
what do I do then? Because I could say, hey, I'd really like you to be more interesting. And then they get upset and then we have to do a whole thing. Or I can just walk away, but sometimes that's not possible. So tips for us easily bored people who I don't really care that much about what the other person's saying quite a lot of the time, if I'm honest, if I'm
Uh-huh.
just honest. So like, what do I do? I don't want to be an asshole, but simultaneously, like, it's too much work not to be.
Okay, so for one thing, I don't think you have a problem being an asshole. Is that true? Like you
Yeah,
don't think
I
that's like
can be, but there's consequences to that, you know. Like it's very tiring because someone cries and then someone resigns, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of
got it.
work.
So you want to keep the relationship and you want
Yeah.
to because I mean one option is just like you kind of like if who you are is kind of abrasive and direct, showing
Like,
people
why
that.
are you talking? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe
Yeah.
not that, but yeah, it's just like, hey, I'm kind of bored with this conversation right now. I'm
Yeah.
totally down to keep talking with you, but like, can we shift topic to something you're actually interested in? Or like,
Yeah.
can we talk about this? So it's like, it doesn't really matter what you say initially. It's more, do you give another path forward? Because if
Uh-huh.
you're just like,
Give
I'm really
another option.
bored, the conversation stops.
Say
But if you're like,
can, right.
yeah,
Right.
so you
Like, I
say
mean,
whatever.
there's shifting topics, obviously, right? It's like, hey, I'm really interested in leadership. Let's talk about that because that's interesting to me right now.
Yeah, or like,
But
what are you genuinely interested in? Like, figure out like where, because if you're bored, it's because they're probably either bored or boring, and you can find things that like get people lit up that are less boring. So the question
right,
is, you
you can make
want,
them like one of my favorite questions is like, what do you love? Because then normally they're less boring if they talk about something they're really into, right? Like that's a
right?
good move.
But the other question for you is like, what do you find interesting? Like you particularly have something you're filtering for. So what is it
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
filtering
yeah.
for? And how can you get other people to talk about that? Like what question or what prompt will lead to that?
Cool, cool. So there's normally something, isn't there? But it's like, okay, so it's like, how can I sneakily redirect this conversation to my agenda? That's what you're saying.
Yeah. And if you really like can't do that, just be like, hey, I want to introduce you to my friend over here. Walk them over to
I
someone
do
else.
that a lot of parties. ADHD, classic ADHD move. You should know John because I know everyone, right? So
Yeah,
it's dead.
exactly.
It's dead. That's a good move. Okay, that's a good move. I like it. All right. What about top conflict tips? Again, I'm going to be selfish. Conference right now, very intense. The team, dedicated team, very cool team, under a lot of pressure, doing a lot of good stress management stuff, a lot of meditation and centering. We did a humor session last night, which was a lot of fun and helped take the pressure off a little bit. Exercise together. We're doing all the good self-care stuff, but
Mhm.
there's still potential for conflict, right? top tips for conflict in a team.
Well, give me a scenario. Like, what's a conflict that's arising or has arisen?
Someone wants to do the thing and it's not the thing I want to be done.
You as the leader?
Yeah. Or it could be, what would be another one? Someone said they do a thing and they didn't do the thing. One would be someone's tone is just unpleasant. Like occasionally we just people are just stressed and they're like, you're being rude, you know, like that's one we get. I'd say the most common one is arguing about resources. Like, we only have this much money or this much time. How are we going to spend it? That would be pretty common.
Got it. So one thing I'll say, conflict resolution, I think, is pretty different when you're dealing with power dynamics versus people on the same level.
Okay, got it. Because I can just say, do it or you're fired.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, or you can say like, hey, come to me with a proposal and let's discuss it. Or like, you know, here's what the norms are that we agreed to. Like, do you still want to do that? Like, you can set it up in advance so you have something to refer back to. But that's easier to do if you're the boss. If you're working with people on the same level. Oh, one thing on that though, like, it's like jujitsu versus aikido. Like, if someone comes at you with force and you meet it with force and like stop them or like bring them to the ground or whatever, karate might be a better one. I haven't learned as much jujitsu, but aikido is like someone comes at you with force and you take it and you redirect it. That's really powerful. Like, so telling someone, no, you can't do this, or that's not how we act here, that breeds resentment. But if you're like, sweet, you're super passionate about this thing, let's turn that passion in this other direction. Like, you really want to use our resources in the direction of like hiring more people. Cool. Like, what are other ways we could use our resources? Oh, you gave me 3 ideas. One of those sounds really good. Great. Let me empower you to do that thing instead. So give them directions to go into. And then if individual people are in conflict, one thing that I really love that Holacracy says is like, or I forget if it's Holacracy or Michael Porcelli or something was talking about like that oftentimes we try to solve systemic problems through relationship.
Okay, interesting. Say more.
So one question is like, are there systems in place? Like, for instance, if someone wants to use resources in a certain way, how does that get decided? And like, what are the criteria and the metrics and who decides? And like, if somebody wants to change it, like, how long does the decision stay in place before it gets reevaluated? So one question I always ask is like, when a conflict is happening, what's causing it? Similar example, like if you're driving on a street and people keep breaking traffic laws on the street, there's a really cool thing in Berkeley now where they've got a task force that's like trying to figure out not only like how to penalize people that are breaking laws, but also what is it about that street that's causing people to break laws all the time? Like, is there inappropriate signage? Like, is the turn really difficult? So a lot of the time,
Berkeley, and people can't handle rules and laws in Berkeley.
oh my God, yeah.
That's what's going wrong right there. Yeah, but I like it. I like it as an approach, right? The Dutch were the first, I think, to do that with traffic laws. They'd go, okay, why do people keep turning left? You know, I just saw this done with paths. You know, it was like, it's like if people keep walking across the grass, why not build a path there?
Right.
Like, come on, like this is naturally people don't want to take the long way around, so fucking make a path and they won't ruin the grass.
Right. There's one more thing I want to say about conflict, which is a lot of the time when people are in conflict, they want someone else to solve it. Like, they're coming to you like, hey, this thing is wrong, can you fix it? Or coming to someone else like, hey, I'm pissed that you did this thing. The best way to resolve conflict is put the power back on them. Basically be like, cool, come to me with like a proposal for how you want to deal with this, and then you're in charge of advice processing it. You have to this is how we run my company. If you have a decision you want to make, you get input from each of the people that are impacted by it. You don't have to take that input. You just have to get it, and then you're responsible for making the decision. And that, like, I'm not responsible. Like, I don't make most of the decisions in my company. It's great.
How big is your company?
Right now, I think we have 6 people and probably like
full-time
15 contractors, not part-time.
Okay, and doing this kind of work, yeah. And who do you love working with?
Like on my team, or like
like personally, who do you love working with? Like, what kind of clients, what kind of people? Like I mean, you mentioned various, but I don't fucking trust Google, so please don't mention them again.
Yeah.
Who do you
I like working with people that are like actually that are already doing some sort of leadership without realizing it. So basically the people that are going to be the ones at a party that like give the idea, or who keep like kind of ending up in leadership in their communities but not quite knowing why, and kind of getting stressed about it because they're just like, I don't know how to do this, or I'm stressed all the time, or like the people that basically, if they learn something, they're instantly going to go out and like put it in practice in a way that includes others.
Mm-hmm.
That's my absolute favorite, because I know that whatever sort of, like, I love it when people call me and say, "Hey, I want to start an authentic relating community in my area. Like, do you have any tips, or what do I do?" The last time someone did that, at the end, she asked me what my consulting rate was for the hour, and I was like, "Go fucking lead an event. That's the payment."
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
sort of
Get out there and do it. Okay. What are you teaching at the conference?
Teaching how to confront the elephant in the room.
Go on. So it's such an overused phrase. I keep hearing people say this when it's just not the metaphor. Like, it's the elephant in the room. I'm like, no, it's not. Like, what do you mean by that?
What are you talking about? Like, what's
Well,
the
normally
time?
the elephant in the room is like the unnamed thing, right? But I
Yeah.
often hear people using that metaphor just utterly inappropriately. So I don't know if it means something to someone else, maybe, that I'm missing.
Okay.
Is
The
that what it
elephant.
means to you? Like, to the thing that's unnamed, that's a big deal?
I mean, the elephant in the room for me right now is that I have no idea what scenarios you're thinking of.
Okay, now you've got meta on me. I'm not clever enough for that. So it's okay. Just tell me what you're fucking teaching. What are you teaching in the conference?
I'm teaching about how, like, yeah, there are these unnamed things in the room. Like, either nobody can see them, like you've just got that tension going on, or like if you and I had started out and I had no idea why you'd actually wanted to talk to me, that would have been an elephant in the room for me. It's like there's a thing that like I can't quite name. Um, so sometimes it's something that everyone like can feel it, but no one knows what it is. Other time it's something that everybody knows what it is, but nobody wants to speak it. That happens a lot
We've
of
got the
the
sort
time.
of somatic elephant, which is just like a felt sense, and you need
There's a
that like intuitive person to bring it to the explicit. And then you've got the one that actually just isn't being named. It's like, look, John,
right.
come on, this is your ex-wife. That's what you're arguing. Let's be honest,
Right. And the
Yeah.
first one, the really interesting thing about the first one too is sometimes it's a feeling, but sometimes it's like something keeps going wrong and we don't know why. Or this person keeps not doing something and it's not clear why. It's like whenever the system isn't working, a lot of the time it's because there's a big elephant standing in the way. Like, how do we talk about that, and how do we do it in a way, because the reason people often don't name the elephants in the room that are like the ones that everyone knows especially, is because like a huge amount of energy gets released when that happens. You can think of it as conflict, but really like it's energy. Call back to Jason Diggs' book. Uh, so it gets released, and then it can be overwhelming. It's like, oh shit, people just said that the boss never listens. Or like somebody just called out that John keeps complaining about his ex-wife, and now everybody's tense, nobody knows what to do. And either we just kind of like bottle it back up really quickly. We're like, no, it's okay. Like, let's just go on with it. Or the group gets overwhelmed and sometimes breaks apart. It's like if you split an atom, all the energy that comes out.
Often I look at conflict and there's like a little bit of hassle to save a lot of hassle afterwards, but you have to it's the opposite of striking a match. It's like there's going to be some hassle and then it's less hassle afterwards. So that's kind of how I look at it. And I'm like, can I be bothered with the little bit of hassle right now to get the bigger win that's going to come from outing this? Like, that's kind of how it feels. And sometimes I'm just like, I can't today. I'm too tired. There's no way. And other days I'm like, yeah, fuck it, let's do it. And there's a sort of courage, I think, that's necessary at that point.
Yeah. There's two things. One, it depends on the length of the relationship. Are you going to see this person again? Because if you're not, probably not with time.
Not worth bothering.
Yeah. And then also, like what we were talking about earlier on, like the longer the elephant sits, the harder it gets to address it. So if you can start addressing elephants earlier on in a team or a relationship, you can set the norm that this is a place where we speak these things.
Okay. Yeah, we can name these and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Elephants. There we go. Elephants in the room. Is it African or Indian elephant? One has big ears.
Now my mind was on Monty Python. Sorry.
You're gonna go for the swallow with the Europeans. African or European?
African or European. I mean, that's the automatic.
I watched Excalibur the other day, the film about King Arthur, and it reminded me of Monty Python's Holy Grail. They've got remarkably similar sort of film technique, actually, even though one's an entirely serious film, the other one isn't.
Were there or were there not coconuts?
With the clapping, no, there was no coconuts. There was real horses in this one. It wasn't there. Okay, so I'm looking online. Resource Center. This is authentic revolution. Why revolution? That's kind of overused at the moment.
I mean, not as much at the time I did it, but
you were probably ahead of the curve there, to be fair.
Exactly. Oh, it's no authentic revolution because like at the time, like before that we'd been connection core. And you know, it was like I wanted something that was gonna be like, yo, we're not just like a connection company, and it's not just about like feeling good with each other and empathy. It's also about like breaking some boundaries and like being authentic and kind of being in relationship at the same time. So it's like, what would it take to make authenticity a revolution? You know, and that was kind of the question we were holding. Still is.
So I was going to say, is it a revolution because it starts with good intentions and ends with people being murdered for having slightly different opinions to the people running the revolution?
We were just talking about the elephant in the room. So
that's normally how a revolution starts and ends, isn't it? You know, those two things. It looks fun. Okay, and a relating games manual. So tell us a game. Tell us an authentic game. Tell me a game I can play with one of my friends instead of doing something fun that authentic and stuff.
Thanks. I mean, with you and one of your friends, it would probably be something like, okay, we're going to set a timer and we're going to go back and forth and play the game, like what I think you think of me. And we're just going to
eat. You think of me.
Yeah. So it's like, what I think you think of me is that like, I'm kind of trying to be interesting, but really I probably have this like kind of like secret, soft, and like, you know, empathetic, and I really just want conscious communication for everybody.
I don't want to play that game. That's a horrible game. I have to think about what you think. I'd have to be way clever. Like dolphins can't do that. I can't do that. What do you want to play my game? I've got one called Who's the Most Spiritual. Do you want to play?
Yes.
Oh, that's not a very spiritual answer. A true spiritual person would not want to play a competitive game about who's the most spiritual. So here's how it works.
This is like fucking with people authentic relating. Like,
maybe I could do that. I feel like I should do like, I like what you do. I say with Jason and John and Marish, like I feel compelled to take the piss horribly, but I do like it. But part of me feels like maybe part of my life's work is to be like the anti-version. That it feels like there's some sort of like good and bad, like white and black, and you know, like I want to be the antichrist of authenticity. I don't know what that means. But that's my ambition.
It depends on how you're. So I feel like in this interview, like based on like what I think you think of me that I just said as well, I think you have this idea of like what authenticity and what this like conscious communication thing is. That it's like, you know, people are being nice, people are owning their experience, is that true?
I don't think nice. There's this sort of I've come across this, tell me if it's wrong, this quite complicated, self-interested thing.
Yeah.
And it's, what is it that's lacking for me? It's like a need for kind of like, if I got NVC on this, like something like simplicity or flow, or like, you know, my joke's always authenticity is like wild sex. If you think you're having it, you're not, you know, like, like I never met anyone authentic who said they're authentic. You know what I mean? Like, because they don't have to say it. Like,
so
I'm trying to figure out what is it that annoys me so badly about it.
I think you're annoyed not by the concept, but by the culture.
But maybe, because I mean, I like hanging out with John. He speaks his mind, and Marisha's really empathic. I like those guys, you know. So you know, I'm talking about, by the way. And I say John and Marisha. You know these people, right?
Yeah.
It's not just making up names.
So,
it's boring.
People that are part of a culture are oftentimes like, you can't paint a culture by the people part of it, because they're at all different levels of, and they're also like, they have all different understandings of what the theory is. The people that are leading it maybe have gotten knocked around enough that they kind of get like how to do the nuances, that like just because people aren't speaking cleanly and quietly doesn't mean they're not being authentic. But this is why cultures get misunderstood all the fucking time, because you can't have a cohesive culture because everyone's understanding it differently as soon as it trickles down. So like, yeah, okay, maybe authentic relating does some good stuff. The question is more, does it do more good than harm when
Yeah,
people?
yeah. No, I wouldn't have had Jason on if I thought, for example, it did more harm than good. So clearly, I think it does more good than harm, and I'm glad that there are these forms of interpersonal meditation and different games and communication skills type stuff. I mean, I'm glad that exists in the world.
Yeah. And I think that I love the way you communicate. It's direct. There's people in my company who do that I love, who will just speak their minds, like say the thing. We're super sarcastic with each other. And I think that's like a form of authenticity. Authenticity is about finding different parts of the self and being true to them more than like having one self that's like owned and nice or whatever it is. It's like, how do you want to express? What are different ways of doing that? And how does that interact with the world? And then the exploration.
Let's talk about wanting to be liked. So this is
Okay.
something I've sort of become recently aware that most humans have quite a strong need for, and it's confusing, and it seems to be a real barrier to leadership. Like, I don't know how you can be a leader and want everyone to like you. Those two positions seem to be completely impossible to hold.
Hmm.
And I'm sort of becoming aware recently that one of my leadership skills, if I have any, is just the ability to be hated or to be unpopular.
Hmm.
And I'm okay with that. Like, it isn't that big a deal to me. I'd kind of, given a choice, I'd rather everyone liked me, but it's not that big. I'm bottom 1% agreeableness on psychological tests. I'm just realizing that most people aren't. Are you an agreeable person who sort of wants to be liked, or not so much?
Oh, I very much want to be liked, and
What
I
is
have a
that?
respect for boundaries. Um, I think it's just like it's like a genetic human evolutionary thing. Usually we want to be part of groups. We want to be accepted into them. Like for you, it's like maybe you don't want to be liked by the general public, but I bet there are some people in your life where if you lost their affection, it would impact you.
Yeah, sure. There's few and not very many. And even
Yeah.
them, like, I'd rather they liked me, but it doesn't seem to be as critical a need. I mean, I'd rather my wife like me than not, for example, right?
Yeah.
This is clear. But it doesn't, she's even less like this than me. Like, but it doesn't seem to be a critical need. You know what I
Uh-huh.
mean?
There's also a difference between liking and belonging. Like
Okay.
I could not like you, but you can belong in my inner circle. I think that's often what people are really looking for when they look for
They want to
liking.
belong. They really want to belong, not to be liked.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of folks in communities I've been part of that nobody likes. They know nobody likes them, but they feel like they belong in that community. It's like the way that like the old story of the master that pays the really annoying guy that never does the work to stick around because like he belongs in the system of the community.
Uh-huh.
But it's also like, like living in New York where you're bumping into people all the time.
Is that where you grew up?
No, but my dad did, and he used to tell me about how like when you're living in New York, you just develop a bit of a shield where it
Yeah.
like doesn't bug you as much if people bump into you and you don't notice the people around you as much. If you're leading for a while, I think even if you have such a super strong need to be liked, after people dislike you a lot, it just starts getting filtered more.
I mean,
It's
it is
like,
a practice, isn't it? After a while, if I get less than 10 pieces of hate mail in a day, it doesn't really land. It's just sort of like, okay,
but
okay,
it's
whatever.
also like, are people disliking you or are they disliking your image and the thing they see about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a projection. That's the other thing I've learned is that no one's actually, particularly once you're in leadership, no one's actually seeing you. I think it can be profoundly almost dehumanizing leadership because people, particularly in alternative communities, they have so much stuff around power and authority that the chances of them actually fucking seeing through that to you as a person, to me as a person, it's pretty minimal. So
Right.
I go, okay, you're mostly dealing with projection here.
And then the question is like, what projections, if you continuously get certain projections, they probably are at least partially about you. Which ones do you care about changing? And which ones don't you? Because everyone's going to have different ideas of who you should be.
Mm. Yeah, too much to think about. Too much to think about for sure. Okay, we better wrap this up fairly soon. Is there anything I haven't asked you about that you would love to talk about?
I mean, tons of things. Let me think if I have any off the top of my head. Um, no, I think I'd just like to say that It's been really interesting at the main themes of what we've been talking about, and one of them feels like the the difference between how something is perceived and how it like actually is meant to be. It's like the platonic ideal. Like the ideal of what circling and authentic relating is going to be different than how people live it and how it looks. And like that practice is, takes the ideals of a lot of practices before them and tries to do it again. And every system is going to get corrupted. It's more like I want people to take the games and the work and try them and figure out what's useful for them in service of the person they want to be and how they want to interact. And like if that looks like what's in the manual, great. If it doesn't, great. It's more, does the idea get across and do people find it useful?
And is your intention to keep doing this kind of work? Like this is you feel like this is your life path?
I don't know. Probably not.
Probably
What I
not.
like what I like about it is not so much the specific practice. It's the chance to learn all the time, write, teach, interact with people. I might take those and move somewhere else after a
Mm.
while. It just
Mm.
depends on like what I like most and where I think I can do good. Probably won't be. I've built most of the system I wanted to with authentic relating, and it's almost self-sustaining. And when
Wow.
it is, I might step away.
Okay, cool. Okay, where do people find you on the internet, Sarah?
Well, Mark, I'm glad you asked.
Well, this is the bit where you can plug yourself. How's that for authentic?
My website is authrev.org, so AUTHREV, like authentic revolution.org. And it's got the games manual and courses and resources and a bunch of other stuff.
Got a lot of stuff on there. It's got a lot of
Yeah,
stuff going on there.
the main thing that I'm working on right now that I'm stoked about is in early next month, we're going to be releasing an online leadership training, facilitation training that is like 160 videos by 8 different teachers. And we're beta testing it now, and it's going to be awesome.
Who's amazing in this space? Like, who's just someone that, like, if they were teaching at a festival, you'd jump to be in their class?
In terms of authentic relating?
Yeah. Who do you rate?
I'm trying to think of people you haven't interviewed.
Yeah, you can mention them too. It's nice to pick them up.
Yeah, I like the way Jordan shows up. He's a close friend. Mike Bloss is fascinating. His brain works on like right angles all over the place. Like interesting. Talking to him is really interesting. Porcelli manages to like build like it's almost like you can watch him building toothpick towers out of his brain, and it
okay, in Boulder. Yeah.
Things is really cool. Megan Morrison, great community builder in this sphere. She's just got a way of like bringing people together that's really cool. And I kind of like Josh Stein too, because he's kind of like the, I don't think he'd mind me saying this, but he's like the on the spectrum version of a community leader. So the way he's just like really interesting. And he built one of the first AR communities. So like those wouldn't be the big names, but they're the ones that I really enjoy.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It's just nice to hear, different opinions. And who's a total knobhead? Who should we stay away from?
Oh,
type it in the chat.
I actually don't know if I have any names on that off the top of my head.
Okay, so good. Sarah, thank you for your time. I hope listeners got some value from this and you were able to get across what you wanted to. So thank you, Sarah, for your time.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thanks for doing it.